Saludos and salutations, Broncos Country. Welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I'm your host, Alan Diaz, and joining me today is my co-host at Richie. Richie, my friend, how are you doing today?
Not bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Well, actually, let me reiterate, I was doing all right. We got some very, very surprising, I guess you can say in a certain way, news. But
let's go with startling. Concerning.
Yeah, we could put it that way. We do have a very special episode for our viewers, audio or live, very well today. We have a very special guest that's going to be joining us in just a little bit. And this is going to be continuing our Ask a Fan series. Now, if you haven't been part of it, it's been a fantastic series that Richie and I have been doing for the last month or so. We've had a Lions fan on the show. We've had a Bengals fan on the show. So this is our third invited guest, mistaken, in terms of a fan coming onto the show. So I'm really excited for our special guest today, Rich.
Oh, so am I. I've been looking forward to May the 4th for quite some time.
That's exactly correct. But before we get to our special guest, let's say hello to some of the people here in the chat room who are watching us live. Shadow Jacker, he says, "Let's go Denver."
Shadow, thank you for joining us again.
That's exactly correct. The boss, McCreasy, what's up? It's almost like I almost feel like he's paid to say that, you know. Mohammed Badri says, "What is good, fam? Everything's good." Mohammed, thank you for joining us. Jerry Holland, I hope I said your last name right. He says, what up, yo? And Kenneth Booker, very, very well, loyal viewer of the show. So anyway, guys, without further ado, let's bring on our very special guest. He is known as the Mile High Prophet on Twitter. Please welcome our good friend, John. I hope I remember your last name, Buckley. Buckley, I'm sorry. John right. Buckley. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
Thank you. I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Oh, no, thank you for coming. Now, for those of you who don't know much about you, tell us how you became to be a Broncos fan.
Well, I grew up in Houston, so I started off as an Oilers fan. And when I was 10 years old, I put my name in a hat, got drawn to be a mascot for the Oilers, got my picture taken with old Kenny Burrow, 00, back in 76, got my name up on the old Astrodome scoreboard. But God knows the Oilers were never making it to the Super Bowl, and Denver frequently did. So I was always cheering for the Broncos during those Super Bowl days. 1996, the Oilers left me and broke my heart. And I switched over to full-time allegiance to the Broncos, moved to Denver in 2002, and the rest is history.
No, I totally hear that. So have you, if you had to pick your favorite Broncos player, which one would you say that would be?
Well, I'm going to have to give you two answers there. First, the provider, John Elway. He is the deity in my universe. He is the provider of all things Broncos to me. After him, it would have to be Steve Atwater.
Ooh, very, very well choices. So, it's been getting so much fun getting to know you, and we'll get to know more about you as we go along in the show, John. So, Rich, let's get to the breaking news that happened literally about maybe an hour or so ago, which was...
we got to stop doing this. literally every Tuesday, it seems... It's been almost like 3-4 weeks, I think, in a row, right? Where we've had something that's come out that's been, worthy or mentionable. I don't know if you were here for the episode when we had our Lions fan on, but quite literally, I want to say maybe an hour before we went live, they announced that our 17th game was against the Lions.
Yes,
like that day. So I mean, literally, the timing could not have been better. So I thought that was spectacular.
Vic, a loyal fan of the show, he says, "The Prophet, welcome and mile high salute to you."
Actually, I would like to have a little tribute here to our buddies at Nothing Rhymes. I think we need to start adopting on our MHRTs the mile high five. I really do think that is an important thing to permeate through the Broncos country as a whole, because it needs to become a thing. I agree, and I would love to originate with our show. So we may want to have a collective mile high five at some point, because I think that really, I really do want that to catch on, because I think that can be really unique.
We'll have to check in with the boss, because we don't know. That could be trademarked or copyrighted.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we don't want to step on their toes.
So yeah, exactly. Mohamed Badri jumps into our very first topic, which is Jawan James getting hurt. Ladies and gentlemen out there in the audience, he was apparently working off of team facilities, and he tore his Achilles ankle. And Mohamed Badri says the right tackle situation could jeopardize our season. Now, as I was reading that news, it kind of just I kind of feel like this is a dance that the Broncos have been in before, and not just because they're dealing with an injured right tackle player, but the fact that right tackle has been such a problem for the Broncos. You have Donald Stevenson, Menelik Watson, just recently, what's his name, Wilkinson, who just got dealt to Chicago. Now, Wilkinson, even though we do give him a lot of stuff when he was on the team, he was trying to play a position that was not normally what he was for. He's more of a guard, but for some reason they kept putting him at tackle, and we saw what it was. So what do you guys think is or should be the solution, or what do you think the GM should do in this predicament?
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is the right tackle has been our Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the irony. It's crazy, isn't it?
we don't have sound effects on this show, but that drum effect would it be appropriate, I think, right about now? Yeah.
We had talked about this a moment ago before we went on camera. I have heard thoughts about Reisner sliding over to right tackle, and Moody or the new guy, the third round, Meisner, possibly starting at left guard. I'm not sure what I think about that. My biggest concern is that Bowles has developed a chemistry with Reisner, and he's a very much in his head kind of player, and dividing up that chemistry really worries me.
No, I totally agree. Adam Sears jumps in. He says, "Hey guys, move Reisner to right tackle." Now, I did see Boggins. He mentioned this in our chat, Richie, that Reisner is not a frame to play the right tackle position. In order to play left or right, you kind of have to be just a bit bigger than a guard or maybe even a center would be. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is, but that's the understanding that I got from it. So I do think that this is going to be a pretty big challenge for Mike Munchak in terms of if Denver can't go out there and get a solid guy from who's ever left in free agency, or if they can't trade for one, let's say, it's going to take some rearranging from Mike Munchak to see, okay, we're going to put this guy here, or we're going to move this guy there. So the preseason, those 3 games that are coming are really going to be important to try to see how they can shift this O-line and try to get something to work by week 1.
So for the right tackle spot, you typically want a rather wide anchor and also a heavier anchor to prevent yourselves from getting kind of flipped and pushed backwards into the quarterback. So you saw that with that's why Wilkinson kept on getting put there, because he's got a broad and wide anchor, which allows him to, in theory, it should have allowed him to not get pushed into the quarterback. We kind of saw different results last season. And then you're also looking for a longer length, because you're often dealing with either power or speed, depending on which edge they end up putting on the tackle side, or your side as being the tackle. So you either need to be able to absorb the power or speed rush and then not get pushed over or pushed backwards, or you need to be able to push back the speed rusher, who's typically going to be smaller and lighter, in order to then hold your spot there on the right-hand side. So to speak to your point, they're 6'10". No, Reiser is not a good fit at the right tackle spot, although he did play some right tackle, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in college. So I think that's why a lot of fans are saying, well, I don't know, we got Reisner over there. The NFL and college are They're both football, but they're not the same. They're not the same brand of football.
It's night and day.
And we just need to be mindful of that as fans. That college and the NFL are not interchangeable, even though they are technically the same sport. It's just like CFL and NFL, right? They're both football, but you're typically dealing with some different rules and that sort of thing. And so a lot of players that may not succeed in the NFL can actually do quite well in the CFL, but the same is not true when they come back in reverse and they come from the CFL to the NFL.
Warren Moon being the exception.
Pardon me?
Warren Moon being the exception that proves the rule.
Well, Flutie was a bit of he did all right. He wasn't great, but he did all right. But again, like there's a reason why they're rare, right?
Kenneth Booker was suggesting Michael, is it Mitch? Oh, I'm sorry, Mitchell Schwartz would be awesome. Now, Mitchell Schwartz and it would be, I mean, his name alone would be great. The only thing is obviously what George Moravi here points out. George, thank you for coming on to the show. He says, I don't know if he will pass a physical right now, but later. So he would be a guy to watch if you can kind of see like, okay, maybe he won't be at 100% by week 1, but if you can kind of maybe squeeze him on, week 3, week 4, maybe mid-season, he can maybe be a stowaway guy. I mean, I don't know. But unfortunately, and as much as I hate to say it, this was one of the issues that was needed to be addressed in the draft, whether you addressed it round 1 or, round 7. And unfortunately, George Payton did not pick up a single tackle. So right now it's either looking like, trying to get lucky with an undrafted free agent that who didn't get their name called, or like I said earlier, the Broncos could trade for one, or they can test their luck in free agency.
Well, we should be thanking the football gods that it happened in the beginning of May, not the beginning of August.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, so there's going to be a few people. So as an example, as Mundungus points out here, Calvin Anderson, I actually thought he filled in beautifully for us when he was at left tackle, and I really think that he gets overlooked by many. However, as I say that, I then revert over to the other side. He did not look particularly good when he had to flip his technique to go to the right-hand side when he was asked to fill on that side of our offensive line. Can he learn? Sure, I guess it's possible, particularly if Munchak had a heart-to-heart with him at the end of last season to say, your number one thing that you need to work on is flipping your technique in order to play the right side, because that's probably where you're going to be the most valuable to us.
And a Hall of Fame offensive line coach to make that happen.
Correct. But at the same time, though, you want to spend that extended period of time away from the team, even like we saw with our newly signed draft pick there in the 3rd round. You spend that extra time on your own learning the newest positions that you're being asked to play, and that being offensive center for our new draftee, the gut. And that's an important skill for you to learn, is that self-motivation, that individual push and drive to be great. Because, I mean, you look at any of the great NFL players, each and every one of them has done and will continue to do those exact same things on their own. James Harrison, you saw his regiment, like it was well documented, which was just unbelievable. Ray Lewis, and amongst other people, all had these just incredibly detailed and granular regiments and routines that helped them become what they were. So Anderson, in my opinion, he would have had to put in a fair amount of work in the offseason to help work his technique change over. But we as a Broncos team should be incredibly fortunate and feel incredibly fortunate to have him on our team, because when we saw Bowles go down for that one game, a left tackle is not easy to find. And a guy that's able to play like Anderson did on the left-hand side for us as a fill-in tackle was extraordinary, and we should be incredibly happy.
Indeed. No, I totally agree. Miguel Santisteban, thank you for joining. He says, what about Charles Leno, who just got let go by the Chicago Bears? I don't remember. I can't think off the top of my head if he played left or right for that Bears O-line. He was a decent player. Don't get me wrong. I haven't really heard anything like huge complaints out of him terms of him being a sieve, but it looked like the Bears are trying to revamp their O-line, and unfortunately Charles Leno was a casualty. It could be because of I don't know what his contract looked like, but Mr. Boggins here also jumps in. He says Calvin Anderson has been training with Bowles all season, so that's actually great to hear. I was not aware of that, and hopefully he can learn to switch around his technique, like Rich said, that Mike Munchak wants him to do. Because the thing about this whole thing is that we still don't know for sure who's going to be under center in September. You know, there's a lot of rumors heating up, which is where we're going to get into the second topic of today's show, which is about Aaron Rodgers supposedly being interested in coming to Denver. And those talks are heating up by the day. So if you get a guy like Drew Lock, who's going into his third year, Drew Lock kind of has an idea already of how the O-line works. If Teddy Bridgewater wins the starting position, Bridgewater, he's a pretty mobile quarterback. He's not somebody who'll get stuck behind. You know, if he needs to move, he can move. But unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers is 37 years old, a year older than I am. So he's not exactly a mobile quarterback. So he needs that pocket protection. So, you know, he can do what he does best. And we've seen when he's up against a very dangerous defensive line like San Francisco has in the last 2 years, they've just been able to get home and wreck Rodgers. And if you don't give him time to throw, it's not going to be a very good day.
I hear you.
So I just
the only thing with Rodgers though is he's a very good anticipatory thrower, and unlike, I mean, it's almost literally the exact opposite of Drew, right? Drew needed a similar, almost like an adjoining kind of like college system. He needed to be able to look at a guy, see him open, and throw him still open. Like that was his preference, right? And kind of like my comments earlier, the NFL is not college. and so what you see from the best of the quarterbacks, your Tom Brady's, your Aaron Rodgers, I'd argue even your Pat Mahomes and other guys like that, is they lead their receivers and throw them open so that as they're catching the ball, they catch it in stride and they can continue on with their routes. And Aaron Rodgers is, I would argue, probably the best in the league at that. I actually think he that's one of his kind of superpowers that he actually has over someone like Pat Mahomes and some other guys. Mm-hmm. Is when you see some of the routes that he was throwing. I don't know how many of the games you caught of the Packers last year. For whatever reason, I seem to make it a point to watch the Packers. I don't know why, but I do. I think it's because in Canada, they just think that like they're north and I'm north, so we should probably like each other. So I happened to catch a lot of Packers games, and when you saw Rodgers throw the ball, it was, I mean, the word threading the needle may not fully describe it or describe it well enough when you saw some of his throws. Like his receiver, I think, took a step, and before he could turn around, the ball was in his face. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you just don't get from most quarterbacks. They can't read things like that well, and they're certainly not that accurate. So I think we need to look at some of his skill sets and just say they're almost the opposite of Drew Lock's. Rodgers is deadly accurate, whereas Drew has good high point balls where he throws to kind of a general area. And then if you have a guy like a Tim Patrick, which is why Tim Patrick, I think, has done so well under Drew Lock, is and I kind of just call them zip code receivers. So your Courtland Suttons, your Albert O's, your Tim Patrick's, those guys. It's also why Jerry Jeudy's not doing particularly well under Drew Lock either, because he's different. Is you need a guy that can just catch a ball when it's thrown in their general area. They pivot and kind of twist their body, and they have good ball control and body control. And those are the guys that are going to do well with Drew Lock. Jerry Jeudy is probably not a great pick for Drew Lock, but we'll see what happens this year, and I hope I'm wrong.
This is the same issue that Peyton Manning had in his early days, and he had these conversations with his father, saying, Dad, nobody's open, and Archie said, you got to throw them open.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I actually saw a video about that exact same exchange. I forgot how I ended up, but when you watch something on YouTube, you start one place and then you end up in another. But I ended up Yeah, in a documentary about Peyton Manning, and I remember that exact conversation he had when Peyton Manning started out with the Indianapolis Colts. Nando D, my brother, who was the Lions fan that we had earlier this year, he jumps in and he says, I hope the Raiders don't snake Rodgers from you guys. I think they will want 3 firsts and JJ. I believe he means Jerry Jeudy.
Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, Rodgers can play until he's 43 as well and would make Denver Super Bowl contenders, in my opinion. Rich,
really
I think he can.
I keep wondering if was it just Tom Brady who sold the devil to play that long?
Well, I don't disagree that Tom Brady has sold his soul to the devil. So we'll start there. Okay.
Agreed.
However, the one thing that Aaron Rodgers has over Tom Brady is, one, he has a much stronger arm. He just does. You look at the two at this point in their career at the 37, kind of that upper 30 mark. I'm sorry, Tom Brady was not looking anything like Aaron Rodgers was last year at that age when he was playing. It's just a full stop no.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that, Aaron Rodgers has always been more mobile than Tom Brady. So again, when you're talking about, I'll steal some verbiage from a few people that we watch in other pods. But when you look at the tools that Aaron Rodgers has, and more importantly, the tools that he has to lose to then kind of drop down to where Tom Brady is today at 43, Aaron Rodgers has a much, much further kind of hill to fall down in terms of, he's much higher up on that mountain in terms of skill sets at this stage in his career than Tom Brady was at the same stage. So unless Aaron Rodgers truly falls off that cliff, and I mean like has to really fall off that cliff and pretty hard, I don't see it as out of the realm of possibilities that we could be looking at, if he wants to play, him playing into 43, 44, maybe even 45. Although I think Aaron Rodgers is a little bit more cerebral when it comes to this. I think he's a lot less football, rah, rah, rah. So I think Aaron Rodgers will take a much firmer stance on his football playing career, kind of like what we saw from Peyton, but Peyton was almost forced to retire because he had some physical issues. I think Aaron Rodgers will look at it to say, my body still feels good. My mind is still intact. I'm a smart enough dude and I've made enough money. Jeopardy looks awesome.
He was pretty damn good on Jeopardy.
Yeah, he was. I saw a couple of highlights. And I've had this conversation with my brother elsewhere, especially over the last couple of days, and he made the same comment to me. I do agree with what he says, though, in terms of Denver being Super Bowl contenders if Aaron Rodgers does come to Denver, because as much as I love Drew Lock and I'm a supporter of him, there's a lot, and I mean a ton riding on him for him to perform if he does get to be quarterback number one. So, and it just seems that even though he dodged a bullet in the draft, he still has to win competition from Teddy Bridgewater. If the Broncos go out and get Aaron Rodgers, then they're going to be kind of stuck with, with the decision of, do we ride with 3 quarterbacks into week 1, or do we try to trade off Drew Lock, unload him off to another quarterback backup needing team at the most. So, but the one thing that I kind of don't agree on is just kind of, which is what Jerry says, sorry, not down with losing Jerry Jeudy. And I told that to him. I don't see the Broncos giving up Jerry Jeudy for the simple fact that Cortland Sutton is due a contract next season. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Tim Patrick is also due a contract because he's playing on a tender. Denver does not have enough money, or even if they do, I don't think they want to pay big contracts to both of those guys. So they could deal out Tim Patrick to Green Bay, see if that'll bite, but I just don't see Jerry Jeudy.
I'm wondering if Surtain's not the trade bait.
It could be. That's actually been speculated too.
Yeah. So I would actually be so for me, the way I'm looking at the way these drafts have gone the last probably 3 years, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, is these wide receivers are coming out of college now in fairly that first kind of 1 to 2 rounds at least. These guys are coming into the league and they're putting up numbers that are on par with some of the better wide receivers in the league. They really are. I mean, so like I think last year the top 4 or 5 wide receivers, I think all had 1,000-yard seasons or somewhere close to that. So when we're looking at these guys coming in and able to play at such a high level, I think we could be. I think we could be honestly looking at the Broncos looking at Courtland Sutton even and saying, is it worth that really big contract that we'd have to pay for Courtland, or do we think we can bring in a round 1 or round 2 receiver in the 2022 draft? Don't get me wrong. I really like Courtland Sutton. I really do. But I think as a GM, when you're looking at certain things objectively, you've seen 3 successive years of very, very high level play from wide receivers coming directly out of college in the first, second, and in some cases even into the 3rd round. So you have to be looking at that objectively at the same things. If I can see it as a fan, there's no way the team isn't seeing it. So I think that that's something that we could be looking at as a team and saying Green Bay needs probably a wide receiver for their young quarterback who's still on a rookie deal so they can absorb that contract, particularly if they front load it. And, a couple draft picks certainly didn't hurt anyone building a team either.
No. And, going back to the comment I just highlighted about Boggin saying, imagine a world where you wouldn't give up Jerry Jeudy for Aaron Rodgers. Like I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure to him that sounds pretty ludicrous. But, to play devil's advocate, Devontae Adams is going into the last year before he's due a big contract. So you could deal out Jerry Jeudy, for example, and then try to see if you can get Devontae Adams to come and play with Denver in 2022, should he have not a very good season with Green Bay, if, the Packers do end up going with Jordan Love. Because let's face it, if Aaron Rodgers leaves the NFC North, that entire division is up for grabs. They just acquired Justin Fields, so the Bears are up on the mend. Jared Goff is probably due for, maybe not Matt Stafford good, but he's going to make some noise out there. Kirk Cousins he's a roller coaster kind of a quarterback, and we have not seen Jordan Love take a single snap in the regular season. So we don't know what to expect coming from there. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think there's anybody in Broncos country that says, no way, no how are we not trading Jerry Jeudy for Aaron Rodgers. I just think that there are better deals that can be negotiated. The Tim Patricks, that maybe Surtain, who, while he's clearly a gifted athlete, he's still an unproven entity in the NFL. And if we could get rid of, let me rephrase. Tim Patrick, if you're watching, we love you. You've been fantastic. But if we could trade Patrick, Surtain, and maybe a couple of ones for Aaron friggin' Rodgers, I don't think there's anybody that objects to that.
The boss Mundungus thinks that the Packers would want Courtland Sutton. I did think about that, but I don't think so, because Courtland Sutton and Devontae Adams are almost kind of like the same player. So I don't think that their chemistry would match up. Now, if that's the case, then I'm pretty sure Denver would more than likely take that into consideration. Maybe, I don't know.
I disagree. I disagree.
I'm just saying we're going to have to give up somebody. Let's just make that clear. Whether it's Sutton, whether it's Jerry Jeudy, or less case Tim Patrick. But Duke Boyden, thanks for coming on the show, my friend. He says Rodgers to Denver.
So I mean, to play off of that, I'm gonna actually disagree a little bit with that as a take. So while I agree with Boggins here, they may want Jeudy for this 5th-year option. I also think we need to be mindful of the fact that Jordan Love is a college quarterback. Rumors were that he wasn't overly accurate. Now, whether or not that was Aaron Rodgers and his camp putting out a whole bunch of noise just because, well, it's Aaron Rodgers and his camp, and of course they're going to try and put out anything that makes him look better. But if there's any truth to those rumors, and you're dealing with a college quarterback who is still trying to get his NFL accuracy and all that kind of stuff, you're going to want a guy who's more of a zip code receiver like a Sutton. Even if you end up having to pay him, again, you're on a rookie deal with a quarterback, you can absorb that kind of cap hit. You're going to want to give a receiver to a quarterback, even if Adams and Sutton are modestly similar. Sutton is, I believe, an inch or two taller than Adams, if I'm not mistaken. And we already know that Sutton has a great catch radius and can pretty much catch just about anything thrown in his general direction. So someone like that is going to be a welcomed addition to a young rookie quarterback who's going to need that kind of help. I'm not so sure that a precise route runner with a fifth-year option is going to be someone that the Packers and a young up-and-coming quarterback is going to covet as much, unless you have someone who's more like a Mac Jones as a quarterback. And I'm not saying that, New England is going to be targeting our wideouts or anything, but a Mac Jones is a more precise thrower of the football, although he has much less tools and that kind of stuff than some of the other quarterbacks that came out in the draft. So I think you're dealing with it's the two different styles of receivers: precise route running or throw it in my general area and I'm going to catch it. Like, are we good now? Sutton fits into the latter. Judy is more of the former. And I just don't think that a rookie quarterback is going to be necessarily looking for a precise route runner. I think a guy like Tom Brady would be drooling having someone like Jerry Jeudy on his team, because Tom Brady would be like, all right, dude, you're going to do a double move. And on this hash mark, you're going to turn left, spin right, and do a pirouette. And then we're good. And I'm going to hit you in stride. So I think that's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with more veteran quarterbacks.
Yeah, Boggins also brings up a good point. Hard disagree, especially since they'd have to turn around and pay Sutton right after Devontae. And that's actually another very good point. Yep. Not enough money to pay to good wide receivers. So go back to this comment from Tim Greenwood. Thank you for watching the show, my friend. He says, no way you can give up Surtain or Sutton or Judy plus ones. Send Tim Patrick and Kyle Fuller or Darby and a few first rounders. I mean, this is going to be a very interesting choice for George Paton here, guys. He's going to have to give up somebody. I don't think it'll be Surtain, although it could be, because the Packers could use a cornerback like Patrick Surtain services. I don't think it'll be. If I had to choose between those three, I would probably say maybe Judy, even though I disagreed with Judy the first time. But knowing George, or trying to understand George, I should say, he would probably, if he had to pick between those three, he would probably send Jerry Judy. Even though Jerry Judy has been showing a bit of rust, he hasn't been as explosive as we expected him to be year one. But most rookies don't have a breakout season. Some do and some don't. So Judy he's due to have a breakout season if he remains to be in Denver.
Well, if I were a sales manager, I would want Mr. Greenwood on my sales team if he could make that deal. But I don't see that happening. I think it's a great idea if it would work, but I can't see the Packers going for that deal.
Tim, I have to agree with the Prophet here. If the Packers take any of that as their deal, I have some snake oil and I would like to turn a profit. Is basically where I'm thinking, is because
PROFIT.
Yes. So I just don't see that happening. I think the Packers they know what they have in Aaron Rodgers, and they are going to be looking for the farm or the King's ransom, whichever one you would like to tout. And I think the Broncos are going to have to, if we don't want to give up as many picks, which I think Peyton may want to try and reel those back and hold some of those to help rebuild the team after he gives away stuff. I think Peyton is going to be probably more likely and more willing to give away certain key pieces, including maybe even Surtain, to try and retain some of those picks, because I'm pretty sure he feels pretty comfortable as a former scout drafting players. I think now might be a great time for us to maybe pivot and look at kind of what our thoughts are on the draft overall. We're hitting just a little over half-hour mark here, and I'm pretty sure some of our commenters and guests here may have some comments and thoughts on our draft.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point there, Rich. It's kind of crazy. According to our scores, if I'm not mistaken, I went 5 for 5. And I believe you only had 2 picks, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took more risk in my draft. I'm a natural risk taker, which is weird because I'm actually deemed a conservative. So that's a complete oxymoron. But I looked at kind of what I felt might be better for some of the teams. And ultimately what we're going to see is were my picks the ones that actually worked out in the NFL, and that those teams that didn't take the ones that I said they should have, maybe they should have listened to me? We'll see. But I mean, the one that I thought was a safe pick for the team, but I just refused to pick it because I just didn't think it was a good fit for them as a team, was obviously the number 2 pick. I mean, the number 1 pick, I think, was just, I mean, was it not already written in magic marker and already handed in before the draft? I mean, like, just like.
And yet they still took the full 10 minutes to make the announcement.
Yeah. Well, they had to milk the time somehow, right?
Yeah.
They had a highlight reel already pre-planned, so they had to play it. So they figured they may as well.
You know what? Just I want to highlight this comment just because before we start talking about the draft, and that's by Boggins. He says, people act like you can give up who you don't want for someone you do want. If you want to get Rodgers, you're not going to like the things we have to give up. LOL. Talk about taking your cake and eating it too. Now,
agreed.
I totally agree with that.
Agreed.
Now, I'm just saying my opinions are just hypotheticals. You know, obviously that what Boggins says is completely true. People are not going to like whoever the Broncos going to have to give up, but that's exactly what it's going to take. You have to take that risk, and you have to trust that our head coach and our coaching staff can make up for whoever the Broncos send over to Green Bay. But with that being said, going back to talking about the draft, let's talk about the Broncos picking Patrick Surtain over Justin Fields, which I'm pretty sure shocked everybody wearing a Broncos logo that night. As you, I would like to think so. I mean, I was pretty shocked. I honestly thought that the Broncos were going to go quarterback, but you know, upon having some time to think about it, it kind of felt like, you know, the Broncos have went offense in the draft the last 2 years under John Elway. You know, 2019 they got Drew Lock and they got Noah Fant. In 2020 they got Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. So it's been rumored that Justin Fields was not on Peyton's list of quarterbacks that he wanted. It's rumored that Peyton wanted Trey Lance, and Trey Lance ended up going to San Francisco, even though some of us thought that San Francisco was going to go get Mac Jones. So how do you guys feel that this in what place does it put us? Where do you feel that the Broncos made the right move in getting Patrick Surtain or the wrong move in passing up on Justin Fields?
Well, I think he just said it, that Peyton didn't have Fields high on his board, and that's frankly why I wasn't that shocked. If Lance would have fallen to 9, I think we'd be looking at a very different first round draft. But if they didn't love Fields, and apparently they didn't for any number of reasons, you know, one of the craziest things I heard in the post draft coverage was Fields he's in his head he may not be ready for prime time, that he's too sensitive to criticism both from his coach and from the public, and he hasn't even begun to get public criticism until he gets into an NFL team and an NFL market. So if he's going to be a head case, then I don't want him in my locker room. So I wasn't shocked that we didn't take Fields. Again, if Lance had been there, I think we might have taken a flyer on him. My first choice was going to be to trade back. My understanding was there wasn't the right deal to make that happen, and I think Surtain was great at number 9. In retrospect, after Juwan James got hurt today, I'm wishing we'd gotten Slater, but didn't he go? Did he go
13th? He went 13th. He fell to the Chargers.
So you know that he was certainly high on my list on tackles, but you know we didn't know James was going to get hurt until today. So I like Surtain.
Yeah, that was so. I have chats and other things to back up what I'm going to say here. I was not surprised that we went cornerback. However, I very much disliked the pick. I was with you. I wanted us to trade back. And in my opinion, I think, well, I know actually, because it was reported pretty consistently after, and Peyton actually, I think all but confirmed it, I think in one of his pressers, that Chicago had an offer for, at the very least, a trade back for us to 20, which also included a first-round pick in the 2022 draft. So I would push back a little bit on the narrative that we did not have a very good offer as a trade back, because getting 2 1s plus, which I imagine we probably could have gotten maybe a little bit from it. In hindsight, maybe getting the one, like the 20th, the number 1, and maybe a 4th this year, maybe that would have been a good idea. And we could have then done something with that 4th rounder. So in my opinion, I think that we should have taken that Chicago deal. I think we should have gone back to 20. I think we should have let Surtain go to whomever else picked him. And I would have liked to have seen us go after even Jenkins at the very back end of that, because I've always maintained that I think that your value picks in the first round are your linemen, so your defensive linemen and offensive linemen, simply because they have such a pivotal role in protecting or making or breaking games. And in our case here, I wanted Slater at 9 if we were going to stay there, and Slater was there at 9, and he was my pick, and I publicly announced it basically to the world. Saying that was the guy that I wanted. He was there. We passed on him. But if we were going to trade back, which I also thought was our best bet, particularly when I saw some of the mock drafts on some of the other podcasts and stuff play out, I was looking at the second round and the players that were left there, particularly bunched into the second round near the early and mids, and just thinking that we could have really stacked our team with some aggressive talent this season and killed it. And instead, we ended up sticking at 9, taking a cornerback, trading up in the second, giving away a 4th. I just felt that we sold ourselves a little short overall in terms of what we could have done.
No, and I hear you guys. And you know what? Even though I had Justin Fields picked to have chosen by Denver, I'm pretty happy with the fact that the Broncos went Patrick Surtain. Because, aside from him, had the Broncos not gone quarterback, linebacker was something that I kind of wanted at the beginning of the kind of like the end of the NFL season. I really wanted a linebacker, because we've been getting torched by Travis Kelce so much. So, and from talking to Boggins, he told me that, this draft class it's loaded with linebackers. So you didn't necessarily have to, go out and get Micah Parsons, who's a really good player, but, he does come with some off-field commitments or issues or what have you. So I do love the pick, and it only time will tell. Hopefully Justin Fields succeeds in Chicago, because Chicago has been needing a quarterback for the longest time. Take it from somebody who lives here, getting terrorized by Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. It's just so disheveling to Bears fans. So hopefully he can go and give them that spark that they needed. And on the other hand, it could be a slip up for George Payton in his first year as GM if Justin Fields goes out there and lights up the field, because then people are just going to, always bring it up, just like they always bring up Ryan Pace passing up on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson to get Mitch Trubisky. But I think Patrick Surtain is going to succeed in cornerbacks. And the reason I think that the George Payton went for it was because of just how our season ended last year, where the cornerback depth was just completely ravaged. So many injuries, so many players just riding the pine or riding the bench. And it was just kind of like, and while I do like the acquisitions, the free agency acquisitions that George Payton has made, Ronald Darby does have an injury history. Bryce Callahan starts off great, but as we saw last year, when he gets an injury, it does cost him time. And Kyle Fuller, I'm sorry?
You said when an injury. Isn't that more of an if? Because he's literally, I don't think he's finished a full season in his career, has he?
I'm not sure. I haven't followed Bryce Callahan when he was a Bear. But when he's on the field, he's a really good football player. But when he gets hurt, and we saw it last year, it's a hole. So not that they don't have faith in Michael Ojemudia or Isang Bassi or some of these other guys that got hurt, but they're still not at 100% even now. So I believe that Patrick Surtain was chosen as depth, even though he might not get the start come week 1. Surtain has the makings to be a number 1, where the Broncos don't have to shell out money to pay both Kyle Fuller and Bryce Callahan at the end of the year. It's basically a contest between those two to see who can play, who can get the better stats and who can win that big contract. And it's like, okay, this guy wins his contract, and then we'll just put Surtain on the other side of the.
Well, I've also been thinking because Surtain is so physical, if he couldn't be in a nickel or dime package and cover the Travis Kelce's of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that actually from several people out there, is that there's been some talk where it's literally Patrick, Travis is there, follow him. Basically was some of the general narratives. However, so I'm of the opinion, while I dislike the Surtain pick, I actually think he's going to do fairly well in the NFL. I do. I don't think he's not. I just yeah. It's just to me, I believe in building the trenches of a football team, especially when you're having a young quarterback that had quite a number of struggles, particularly earlier in the season. And most of it was as a result of particularly the offensive line having some struggles and some issues with the same offensive coordinator. So it comes down to, are we going to try and stick with the run blocking scheme and other blocking schemes that we saw later in the season? And if that's the case, then yeah, maybe a Surtain pick was better for us because we did have 6 DBs on IR by the end of the season. That's kind of a big deal. Or are we going to try and revert back to the original Pat Shurmur run blocking, which is more of like a power blocking style scheme? And if that's the case, then we should have absolutely gone with some kind of an offensive lineman to shore up that O-line, because that's where the value is in the first round. So that's really where I'm coming from. I actually think Pat Surtain is going to turn out to be a pretty good NFL pro. I just don't think he was the best pick for us. I think we could have gone in a different direction and done better for us as a team, because I think that we had we had bigger needs and more needs, which is why I actually agree with you, Prophet. Trading back in the first, I think, was our best bet. And I honestly believe that Chicago trade is one that, in hindsight, Peyton may look at and say, I probably should have pulled that trigger.
The boss has a question for you, Prophet. He says, hey, Prophet, where do you see the defense ranking at the end of the year?
No lower than top 5. I'd put them top 3 easily.
Yes, I totally agree.
I do not disagree with that at all.
I would say top 5, top 3 if we're lucky. I mean, the only glaring issue I see with our defense, aside from linebacker, is just who we get at safety. Kareem Jackson is starting to show a little bit of regression. I do like his spirit and his attitude, but as we saw last year, sometimes too much of that, and it's undirected or unchanneled, is dangerous. I mean, the man knocked his own teammate out with a concussion, for God's sake.
So Steve Atwater, and he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So, take that with a grain of salt. It's worrisome, but hopefully it's not something where, age starts to catch up with you. But, we're getting back a preemptive hyped up Von Miller, who I'm praying stays healthy come week 1. Bradley Chubb. We're getting back all of our injured players. And when you see those names on paper, I mean, it's just dangerous and fantastic to see. Now, it all just comes down to how the offense works out and who's under center come week 1, because one thing that killed our defense last year, and it's something that's been killing our defense the last couple of years since Super Bowl 50, was the fact that the offense keeps turning the ball over, fumbles, interceptions, what have you, and the defense has to go out there and try to defend the ball in their own side of the field. And, and that's with any defense, mind you, not just the Broncos in general. But when your offense cannot go out there and put up points, your defense, as great as it can be, starts to sputter and get tired.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think that last year we saw some real challenges, as you said, with our offense turning the ball over. So I think we saw our defense come onto the field tired. And I think that's fair. Like, I'm not even putting that on the defense. That's on the offensive side of the ball, not staying on the field long enough for you to be able to, catch your breath.
There's only so much conditioning you can do.
Oh, for sure, 100%. And I do think that some of that was put on the offense for putting our defense in a really crappy situation a lot of times, and that really does need to be called out. That being said, I still think that we could have used some help in the center portion of our interior defensive line. If we saw nothing else from the Super Bowl in terms of when you're facing Patrick Mahomes, you're facing some of these better quarterbacks, some of these guys that are kind of like Pat Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, kind of those upper echelon guys. They manipulate the pocket by shimmying around in that center portion, and then they step up to throw. If you force that pressure up, you're throwing them off their first read, and you need that interior defensive line pressure. I don't think we got it enough last season. Part of that, I think, was on our offense, and I think part of it was also on the fact that we had a rookie, or several rookies actually, on the defensive line. So we are going to be somewhat reliant on those defensive rookies taking that next kind of step forward in order for us to kind of make those leaps on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, also with Vaughn out all season, the O-line didn't have to worry about that element of the edge rush, and they could double up in the middle.
Correct.
Mm-hmm, correct. Glenn Hauser has another question for you, John. He says, who does Prophet think will start this year out the gate? And also, who is your favorite pick?
Well, if the question is between Locke and Bridgewater, I think Locke wins that. If Drew Lock can't beat Teddy Bridgewater at this point in his career as early as it is, then clearly he should not be our starting quarterback. If the question is between Locke and Aaron Rodgers, let me just say this for clarity's sake. I consult the Oracle at Mile High before every game, and that is how I draft my prophecies. I have not consulted the Oracle at Mile High with regard to whether or not Aaron Rodgers will be on the team. My gut says that he will be, but I have not consulted the powers that be to determine whether or not Rodgers will be coming. But I think all the signs are pointing there. His girlfriend is in Boulder. Girlfriend or fiance? I can't remember.
Fiance, yeah.
Fiance.
Even more. You don't say, if mama ain't happy, nobody happy.
Right.
You hear that, baby?
Honey, I like it here.
My wife is watching the stream right now.
Glenn Hauser wants to clarify. He says, who's your favorite pick from the draft?
Okay. With regard to that, I'm going to have to go with my tried and true fifth commandment, honor thy blockers, for they are the key to yardage. And I'm going to go with Minor in the third round, the gut.
The gut. Yes. He was I enjoyed watching that highlight tape. Him and as Glenn mentioned, Javonte Williams being picked up. And that's also another issue we should probably talk about since we're getting close to the end of the show. I don't know if you guys saw, but after the pick was announced for Javonte Williams coming to the Denver Broncos, Philip Lindsay went on Twitter and he put out just two emojis of, the crying, laughing emoji. How do you guys feel about that? Do you think he took that in a really bad way, or do you think it was just him joking around?
Rich, you go first.
Does that even, as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty straightforward one. He literally looked at that pick and said, "You're drafting a rookie to replace me." I mean, let's be honest. So here let's rewind a little bit. He went for 1,000 yards in his rookie season. He then came under a different OC and went for 1,000 yards again in his sophomore season. Okay, the problem is not Philip Lindsay. The problem is Pat Shurmur not knowing how to use Philip Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because he then saw a third OC come in his third year with the team, because that's just so easy to accommodate and figure out, right? Is to deal with three different offensive schemes. So in two different OCs, we saw Philip Lindsay go for 1,000 yards. And then in the third, all of a sudden, a guy stuck in the 90s who's never ranked, his offense has averaged ranking, Pat Shurmur's, in the mid-20s. In terms of overall NFL over his entirety of his career. He's averaged in the mid-20s. So as far as I'm concerned, that was Philip Lindsay looking, saying, "You drafted that guy to replace me," laughing emoji, best of luck. And I think, and frankly, if I was him, I probably would have done the same thing, because that's motivation to me. So I'm now going to Houston, and I'm going to now do my damnedest to go back to 1,000 yards or more in the season, and then go back and say, hey, Broncos, how did that look?
You know what? I still have a lot of love for Philip Lindsay, everything he did while he was here as a Bronco, but I kind of found that to not be in the best of, I don't know if I want to say taste, but hopefully I always thought that whoever came to replace Philip Lindsay, he wouldn't take it, personal. Business is business. NFL is a business at the end of the day, after all. But good luck to him in Houston. Hopefully he gets an offensive coordinator who knows how to utilize him to the best of his abilities. That's all I can say.
What crushed me about the Williams pick was I had been a JOK no matter what guy for weeks coming up to the draft. There's my college team right there. I've been banging the table for Jeremiah for a long time, and when they traded up from 40 to 35, and when they were reading the pick and they said I'm like, yes, and then they said Javonte Williams. I went, no. Not that he's not fantastic. He's a beast. I think someone in the comments earlier said that he's an all-around back who isn't injury prone. I think we're going to see great things out of Javonte Williams. But
I do too.
Like we talked
Agreed.
about earlier, I think our biggest need defensively was a coverage linebacker. I don't think Parsons was that guy. I think JOK was, and I wish we could have picked him up, especially when he fell into the second round.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, just on that note, since we're kind of running low on time, and we can't go that much over past the 8 mark, is for me, Browning was actually my number 2. Like, for me personally, he was my number 2. So I actually had Jamin. I'm gonna mispronounce his name, and so Jay Davis. We'll just go that route. He was my number 1, and I had Browning right after him. So when I saw Browning coming to the Broncos at the very bottom end of the 3rd, I was ecstatic. I thought that was a spectacular pick for us. And also with regards to just the 3rd round in general, Quinn, who actually trains not that far away from where I live, I actually thought he filled a potential void where, for me, and it's been no secret, and a lot of the guys on MHRT kind of push back on this, is I thought, well, Lloyd did progress as the season went on for our team. I don't think he pushed the pile forward in the middle of the field for us, which is, your commandment number 5. Which I think is a very important one, which is when you're trying to be an aggressor or the bully on the field, you need that blocking, particularly in the middle of the field. And that also helps out guys like Reisner and Bowles on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, respectively, is having that center that doesn't get either pushed back or held solid. You need the push forward. And I believe Quinn, if he's done nothing else in his entire kind of YouTube and highlight reels and even just game tape that you can pick up on him, he doesn't get pushed back that often. And he's proven that even when he gets put up against, elevated competition, at least in the small sample sizes that we've seen, he's generally been able to hold his own. So I think he will actually provide very solid competition for Lloyd Cushenberry at the center position for us. And I'll be honest, I will not be surprised if he ends up being able to win that job.
Yeah. Shadowjacker has a question for you, John. He says, do you see Ojemudia take a step forward this season or be a bust like Bradley Roby?
Honestly, if I were to guess right now, I'd say Surtain takes his gig.
I wouldn't say Bradley Roby was a bust. Bradley Roby did have a couple of good plays here and there. He wasn't exactly a bust. I don't think he played to the coach's expectations, which is why he got dealt away to Houston. Houston, he did have some decent games out with the Texans. I'm not going to lie, even though sometimes I will admit I went on the record and I wasn't happy with some of the plays that Roby made when he was a Bronco. But I would actually say that Ojemudia, he's at this point, he's starting to look like a better player than Roby is. But Ojemudia is barely going into his second season. So, only time will tell how much playing time he does get. And now that cornerback depth is getting it's a little bit crowded now with Surtain there. So they're probably going to be fighting for that third or fourth spot this season.
The only thing that Ojemudia has going for him is I think Ojemudia might be a slightly faster guy than Surtain might be. But then the question is that I actually believe Surtain is a little bit more mentally perhaps further along in the game. So I actually think to pull off of what the Prophet just said, I actually think that's going to be one of the more interesting battles that we're going to have in our training camp and whatnot, is because I think Ojemudia will probably show kind of better physical abilities and whatnot. But then I think you're going to see Surtain with his pedigree and his mental aspects will likely be able to make up for some things that Ojemudia is probably still trying to learn and pick up on. So I think it'll be really fascinating to see kind of where that falls and where that lands in terms of which one of those two attributes win out between the two of them. I'm honestly fascinated to see where that lands, because I really do think that that's going to be an interesting one.
And I hope we get to see it live in person with fans at training camp.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Trying to get through these questions for you, John, as quick as we can. Who is the Prophet's favorite Broncos under the radar player ever?
Ever? Damn.
No pressure.
Yeah, no kidding. Under the radar. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define that. I'm going to go with recency. I'm going to say Moody.
Ooh, good choice.
I think we're going to see a lot out of him in the years to come.
Moody or Glasgow?
Moody.
I agree.
I totally agree. I was really impressed with what Moody put out there. And
my question was more, who do you think ends up starting? And in my opinion, I think Moody should probably end up starting.
If you divorce yourself from the idea that we're paying Glasgow so much money, if you can put that aside, I think Moody starts.
I agree.
And to close out today's show, where was that comment? Oh, from George Moravi. He says, "Can Prophet read us his commandments?" You
want all 10? I thought you were running short of time.
Trying to give the folks what they want.
Fair enough. If you guys are South Park fans, you will remember in an episode where the kids took over the town and they worshipped the John Elway statue in the middle of the town square. They called him the provider. So I am the provider who brought you out of the desert, out of the land of losses. Thou shalt have no other franchises before me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Orange Crush in vain. Remember opening day and keep it holy. Honor thy blockers, for they are the key to yardage. Remember the drive, the fumble, and the helicopter. Thou shalt not leave the game early. Too many of Broncos people violate that one. The toughest one on the list is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's season tickets. Thou shalt not sell thy tickets to opposing teams' fans. And thou shalt not cheer for a division rival unless it helps thy Broncos playoff bid.
Those are excellent commandments, let me tell you.
That's awesome.
I love those. And unfortunately,
I do just want to say I'd like to thank the Broncos fans for selling their tickets to me when I come to town, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to a game. So thank you.
You're not an opposing team's fan.
No, I'm not. But it's just they're still selling them. They just hope it goes to me and not a Raiders fan.
Yeah.
That's a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, guys, it's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us live in the chat.
Moment of privilege.
Yeah.
Any of you, if you are coming to a game, please come early. Please join us at the Fired Up Tailgate in Lot C, just outside of Gate 10. Look for the big orange Broncos fire truck. All of our proceeds go to charity, and we'd love to have you. We serve probably 300 people a game.
Oh, totally.
That's awesome.
It's very good to hear, to know. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to name everybody in the chat, but thank you, Shadow, Big E, Glenn, Boggins, the Boss McCreasy, Michael, George, Jerry, and anybody who else I've missed. I do apologize. To all our audio listeners, if you're listening to us after the fact, make sure you follow us on Anchor. or Google or Amazon or wherever it is you hear our podcast. If you're listening to us on Anchor, please make sure to, if you want to be a supporter of the show, Rich and I would deeply appreciate it. Please make sure to hit that. If you're watching us live or you're watching us after the fact, please hit the thumbs up button on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. You can follow us at MHRT Podcast. And I also like to thank our guest, John at High Profit. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show and for giving us your insight on the Broncos draft and everything. Rich, anything you want to add before we go?
Just a few things. If we can get everyone to hit those thumbs up, those like buttons, share this and try to grow our audience, we'd greatly appreciate it. We want as many people in here as possible. We really do try to incorporate all of the fans and all of the followers here on the show to make sure that you kind of have your questions and voices heard. So if you can do that for us, that would be greatly appreciated. And I just want to thank the Mile High Prophet for joining the show. And just as an aside, Prophet, Glenn, one of our MHRT colleagues, has maybe you can DM him something on Twitter where your tickets are in the stadium. He is a season ticket holder, so I get the impression he may want to touch base with you when you're at a game.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. So for Mile High Prophet and for Richie, I'm a 6'10" Mexican. Please make sure to give us a personal follow at our Twitter handles. We'll see you all next week, Tuesday. Have a good night and go Broncos.